Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to a special program, An Afternoon with Nehemiah Persoff. We are very, very excited at the Eastchester Public Library to be hosting this program. Mr. Persoff is a true Renaissance man, an actor, painter, and an author. He published his autobiography last year in 2021. I might add that we have copies available at the library. Before we begin today's program, though, I'd just like to go over a few points that will make this an enjoyable experience for everyone. During the first half of the program, which will be an interview, everyone will be automatically muted. During the second half of the program, we invite you to submit comments or questions for Mr. Persoff. There are two ways you can do this. You can either write your comment or question in the chat box, which will be open for the second half of the program, or you can use the raised hand icon, which will notify us or give us an idea that you would like to ask your question directly. Please wait until the moderator acknowledges you to speak. And please speak loudly and clearly so Mr. Persoff hears your question. We have a very large audience for today's program, but we will try to get to as many questions as possible. Be patient. And don't forget to lower your raised hand after you have been acknowledged. And now let's get the program started. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mark Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins is a director, playwright, and lifetime member of the Actors Studio, who is also co-founder of the Freehold Theater Lab. He will be conducting today's interview from Washington State. Mr. Persoff is in California. Mark, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. And good afternoon, everyone. So we are here today for a unique conversation with Nehemiah Persoff, one of our greatest character actors. For over half a century, Nehemiah has portrayed a remarkable range of characters with vivid detail and emotional truth. His career spans more than 40 films, ranging from On the Waterfront to Some Like It Hot to Yentl, just to name a few, and hundreds of roles on more than 35 classic TV series, including live television in the 1950s, and some 75 roles on the stage on Broadway and other theatrical venues. Nehemiah began acting at a young age, but his breakthrough came in 1947 when co-founder Elia Kazan accepted him into the inaugural class of the now legendary Actors Studio as part of a select group of gifted actors destined for notable careers. Indeed, indeed. So for those of you who may not know anything about the Actors Studio, we'll just say that the studio's most basic and important function is to help actors to bring out and express the deepest aspects of the inner life of a character. I expect that Nehemiah might say more about this during our conversation today. And after his retirement from acting, Nehemiah began a 30-year career as a painter, and now, at the age of 102, he is, as Tracy was saying, he is the author of his first book, a memoir, and which was recently published, and I'll just hold it up to get a little glimpse of it for a minute. There's his name under there. Okay. So Nehemiah, this is just a short summary of your long and varied life, which is still well-lived, it would appear, and a life that began in Jerusalem in 1919. And we are very grateful for all of you, very grateful for all of your contributions to the performing arts and to the entertainment world, and for being with us here today. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Nehemiah Persoff. It is a singular honor and joy to spend time with you, Nehemiah. So good afternoon, and how are you today?
Fine, thank you, Mark. That was a great introduction.
Oh, nothing you need to add or correct? Okay, well, I'll get to the first question then.
Okay.
So you were born in Jerusalem in 1919. So can you tell us a bit about the circumstances of your coming into the world, with your father and your mother, their journeys, and how you got here? Oh, you got a phone call.
Excuse me. I'm terribly sorry.
So,
What is that again? Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I just wanted to start at the beginning, how you, what the circumstances were about you coming into this world and about your parents, your father and your
Yes, yes. Well, the time that I was born was a very exciting time to be in Palestine, which later became Israel. When I was born there, first of all, I was sixth generation Palestinians. And even then, when I looked at Jerusalem where I was born, there was a kind of a halo about it, kind of a holiness that you could not escape. And I was also exposed to the muezzin, the Muslim call to prayer. Aside from that, I was exposed to the pioneers who were fired by Theodore Herzl's Zionism talks that he gave, which inspired them to go to Palestine and rebuild the country, the old home of the Jews, so that they didn't have to go around and be unwanted guests all over the world. And also they were going to rebuild the Jewish people themselves because of the being guests in every country and kicked out every time. They had no way of making a living except buying and selling. They became peddlers and storekeepers and things like that. And the pioneers wanted to change that so that the Israeli people had carpenters, garbage collectors, street cleaners, truck drivers, everything. All of the Jews were to be involved in labor, which was something new to them. And so they wrote songs about labor, and they made labor was the thing that I grew up to respect and want to be. I wanted to be a worker. I was exposed to all of this. And then also they came from Russia, which was after the revolution. And so they had all kinds of ideas like collectives to live in and how to bring up kids, whether a baby should be brought to the mother or to the nursery, or whether sons, boys and girls would shower together and all of that. All of these things changed after a while, but when I was approaching 10, I was full of all kinds of these things and the comradeship between the people. For instance, my mother took in 3 immigrants to live with us. And also she adopted a daughter from the orphanage, which made it 5 children and 3 and 1. That's 9 people that she supported. Anyway, when I came to the United States, well, that's another question, but that I think answers your question.
Yes, yes. And you say your mother was a 5th generation Palestinian and your father emigrated from Russia. Is that right?
Yes, yes, that's true.
Oh, okay. So will you tell us a little bit about your name, Nehemiah? I am curious about being, well, my name is Mark, which is kind of biblical, but Nehemiah is really biblical. Can you tell me the kind of, if that had an impact on your identity and your sense of self with such a formidable name?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get, what did you say?
I can ask it again. I was wanting to know what the impact on you personally was with having a name, being named Nehemiah.
Yes. Well, the name Nehemiah was, in Israel, it was fine. But when I came to the United States, it was different from any other name. The kids on the street were American kids. Their name was Jaime and Moshe and Freddie and Adolf and things like that. But I was Nehemiah. And I often used to stand there and look at them all and think to myself, why is it that I am the only one here, born in Jerusalem, named Nehemiah? Was there a calling for me? Was there anything that I was required to do? I didn't know it. I was kind of mixed up is a good word for it. Mm-hmm. But I dealt with it. I learned how to be a street fighter. I learned how to punch before asking a question. It was a tough neighborhood, and I was disappointed with my friends because they knew nothing about the proud history of the Jewish people. They do nothing of the Bible. They do nothing of Zionism. All they want to do is make some money so they can get by. And it was the beginning of the Depression. So it was a very bad time in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where we first lived in a cold water flat. So that was Nehemiah. It made me feel that I was different, and I was different.
Mm-hmm. And you still are. So could we go back to Jerusalem for just a moment? I'm trying to get to the origins of your wanting to be an actor or to be were you able to watch films and performances back in your first 9 years?
Interesting question. When I was a kid in Jerusalem, we lived about 2 blocks away from the center of town, the Zion Square. It's a well-known place. And they built 2 outdoor movie houses there. One was called the Tel Aviv and one the Eden. And the Tel Aviv showed Ben-Hur with Ramon Novarro. And the other one showed the Thief of Baghdad with Douglas Fairbanks. And I had a pole there that I could climb up and see the very top of the screen. I saw about their heads and I couldn't see all the bottom. But that satisfied me. I used to climb up there and watch the movies, one time at this movie, the other time the other movie. And I was thrilled by it. I was always an actor, actually, because I had the feeling that I knew that through being angry, I can get what I want. Through being sad, through pretending to be so-and-so, I could get what I wanted. But I didn't know that was acting. I just thought that was my power. And I didn't really think about movies until I came to New York, to Williamsburg. There I saved my money all week and went to see a movie at the end of the week on Saturday. There I'd sit all day long from 10 to 7 at night. And at night I'd go weary home to dinner. Everybody waited for me to hear what the movie was about. And I would tell them the house version, the version I would do in the house. The following day on the stoop, I would have all the gangs in the neighborhood coming, and they would listen to me tell the story of the movie. And I had a sense, I knew when they were being bored. I introduced a murder, I introduced an accident, I introduced other stuff to make it more interesting for them.
So you improved on the screenplays, huh?
Yeah.
Good. Good.
So anyway, I never ever thought, though, of becoming a professional actor, never. I was determined to be a worker. And when I had to choose between an academics high school and a trade school, I chose a trade school. I learned to be an electrician. I got a job as an electrician after I got out of school, and I hated it. I didn't like it at all. Then I took a test for the subway. I took a test for Cooper Union. That's a college for free for engineers, very good one. And I passed it. And during the first lecture, I sat there and heard the guy talk. And look at all the geeks around me, all the funny looking guys. And I said, this is definitely not for me. And after working all summer to get into the school, I quit after one day. And then I took an exam for the New York subway. I got a job there in the signal department, and it was a good job. But we had a lot of time on our hands, so I got to talk with the people very much. And the railroad people were very different from the New York people in that they were from railroads all over the country, so they were not New York people. And I used to tell stories at parties about them and have fun. And one day a girlfriend of mine said, why don't you go to acting school? I think you're an actor, you're not a subway worker.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I went to school, and that started the whole thing.
And that was at the New Theater League, your first?
New Theater League, yes.
And you had some notable people who were with you and who studied with you. Martin Balsam, Shelley Winters?
Yes, Shelley Winters, Martin Balsam, and a few others that didn't quite make it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then you had this amazing, amazing stage debut. Number one, it was in Madison Square Garden. Number two, they made you up with wig and hair. Number three,
Yeah.
you had no lines, and yet you received a standing ovation. Can you explain that to us?
When I was going to school, one of my teachers was a part-time director. He was a left-winger. And he asked me if I wanted to be in a pageant that he was doing at Madison Square Garden. I said, sure, why not? So he said, go there at this and this time, and there's no words for you to say, you just have to be there. I said, fine. So I went there, and the old man makeup man made me put a beard on me, and this, that. And finally, the assistant stage manager came to me and said, you have nothing to say, just go out there, and when they finish applauding, you come out again. I didn't know why they would applaud, but anyway, I went out there, and the moment I got out there, it was pandemonium. Yay! Hooray, hooray, hooray! For 15 minutes. And I stood there, and I said, wow, I must really have something. What a reception. And then finally, when they died down, I went into the makeup room, and the guy said, okay, Mr. Karl Marx, come over here, and I'll take the makeup off for next year. I was made up as Karl Marx, and these were all communists. And they gave me this tremendous reception. And that was my introduction to acting in front of an audience.
Not a bad debut at all. And then before the Actors Studio, you managed to study with Stella Adler, who, for those of you who might not know, is certainly one of the great actresses and acting teachers of
yes.
the last 100 years. So
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be with her?
Well, I'll tell you something. Maybe you want to cut this afterwards, but I'll tell it anyway. Stella was a beautiful lady, really beautiful. She used to wear shirts that were unbuttoned way down to here. And I would sit on one end of the line, and she was on here. And I would most of the time look over at her to see whether I can catch maybe, hopefully, the nipple. But I never did. She always hid them so well. And we got to be good friends. And actually, after a short period with her, I was drafted into the Army. And on a pass, I came to visit her, opened the door, and the room was dark except for a spotlight. And in the spotlight, a young man was doing a scene from a play that I knew because I had done it before. So I knew that he was finding things that I never even thought were there. At the end, he got a big hand, and I walked in, and Stella introduced me to him, and she said, Nicky, I want you to meet Bud Marlon Brando. And that was the first time I met him. And then after that, I met him at the studio. And also, I'm sorry, at my age, I dry up now and then. I was talking about Marlon Brando, right?
Yeah.
So then he became an icon. Everybody imitated him, including me. But Brando was quite a figure. I credit him and Lee Strasberg with changing the style of acting in America. He came at the right time, and so did Lee. They changed it, yeah.
Very interesting.
They introduced naturalistic acting to America.
Yes, yes. So this is about you, not me, but I very quickly want to say my generation, when I came up, I'm a little bit younger than you, James Dean on the screen just had a huge impact on most of the actors my age who became actors. And I see that you worked with him at least once. Do you have any impressions of him? I've heard a lot of different controversial, different things about it.
James Dean was very interesting because he was a strange guy. He used to do things that you say, why is he doing it? You don't know. But the camera loved him. And in his very first time out on making a movie, he became a tremendous hit. Yeah. Which brings me to another point that I may make later, and that is that no matter how good an actor you are, if the camera does not like you, you stay on Broadway. That was true of Lee Cobb, of Alfred Luntland Fontaine, Catherine Cornell, Ellen Hayes. All of those people were great on stage, but the camera said no. And so, what was I? I was on Marlon Brando. Where was
James Dean for a second, yeah. And on James Dean, about the camera liking.
James Dean, yes. Yeah. So James Dean, in my opinion, was not very much of an actor, but he had this magic on screen, which is true of all big stars. They have magic in front of the camera. Those of us in the actor studio, at that time when television started coming in, it was live television. Some of us knew how to carry a scene from beginning to end, a play from beginning to end. And at the same time, the camera liked us. That was me, Martin Balsam, Rod Steiger, Kim Stanley, Maureen Stapleton. All of these people, we all were like a group. What's that word I want? A group of...
An ensemble?
Yeah, ensemble, yeah. And we worked a lot, and we were very lucky to come along at that time because that introduced us. Alfred Hitchcock saw me in a TV show, and he hired me, and things like that. Things went well after television came in.
So you talked about the camera liking you, and it certainly did, and you're very lucky. But when I watch you, I guess I take that for granted. It wasn't in my consciousness, but I've been watching quite a bit of your work, and what I noticed that is just shot through it all of it, is a sense. If I had to reduce it down, it would be a sense of not only reaching the depths and breadth of the character, but you bring a kind of dignity that is just there all the time. And I don't chalk that up to just camera liking it. I think there's real something there.
Well,
you have a promising future, I think.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to something that's not funny, maybe serious, too serious. And that was that I never really knew when I came to the United States, when I started acting, I never knew who I was. I tried to find myself, and in every character that I did, I tried to find some bit of myself in there, but I never, ever really got to know myself. I'm sure as an actor, you understand. And I would try this part, and this accent, another accent, another. A guy like Gary Cooper or John Wayne, they had the character and the audience loved them, and that was it. Other actor, Cary Grant, I remember seeing old movies with Cary Grant, and he was then trying out all kinds of characters until he found Cary Grant, and then he stuck with it. But I never had the good luck to find out who I was, and I still don't know who I am. At 102, I don't know really who I am. But I guess that in my case, the very searching that I did helped me. Maybe that was my calling, to do different characters, but I don't know. It's a source of uncertainty with me. Yeah.
Okay, so very, very interesting. So I'd like to swing back a little bit to, we talked about Stella Adler, and I would like to, and you mentioned Lee Strasberg and how important he was to you. And again, yes. Lee Strasberg was one of the very early actor studio, and he ran the actor studio from until he died in the 80s. incredible teacher with an incredible reputation. Anyway, would you like to speak a bit about what he did for you, or what your relationship was?
Well, the actor studio was started by Kazan and Bobby Lewis and Cheryl Crawford. Lee Strasberg came in about a year later. The first year when I worked with Kazan, he loved me because I had an intensity that he liked, and he was able to stimulate me to go further and further and further. So I was very proud of that. And when I came to Lee, the first thing when I went up to do a scene, Lee said to me, you know, I've seen you work, and you work like a horse with blinders. You don't care what's coming here or here. When you're driving a car down the street, if another car comes down this road, you have to adjust. You go slower, you go faster. And you're not listening. You're just determined where you're going, what you want, what they call the action. And you're going there without paying attention to anything else. Well, that really set me off. I became very angry with Lee, and I said, Lee, Kazan loved my work, you know, and Kazan was a successful director, more successful than me. He said, I don't care if Kazan liked it or not. That's what I'm telling you. And don't tell me any lies. Don't speak any lines unless you feel they're truthful. Don't write me any checks unless you have money in the bank. I said, okay, I'll be here all day. He said, that's right, we're not going anywhere. So I got on stage, and I was doing a scene from Home of the Brave, which is a war play in the battlefront, and with, I forgot the other actor's name, a good actor. Anyway, I got on stage and I said, Lee, this is a building on 52nd Street, and it's solid wall. It's not a barracks. It's not a barracks that an army would be in. And Lee said, what's the matter with you? Don't you remember that yesterday you had a big battle with the owner of this house, a very rich man, and you beat him and he's gone and now you've taken over the house? Don't you remember that? I said, I don't want to be too difficult. I said, yes, okay, I remember it, I remember it. But what about the automobiles on Broadway down there? I hear them, but what about, how did that get into the battlefield? He said, I don't hear any automobiles, I hear ocean far away yet. I said, oh, I see. And I began to understand a little bit of what he was talking about, not all. And then Rudy Bond is the other actor. He came on wearing his own army jacket with his arm out of the sleeve because he lost an arm. And he was being discharged, and he wanted to know if I wanted him to say hello to my sister in New York. I did have a sister in New York whose husband was in the army, and she was worried. My mother and father worried about me. And my line was simply to say, yes, I'd like you to meet my sister. But I opened my mouth, and I couldn't speak. I was just filled with emotion. Even now, I'll tell you this, I was so moved. I didn't know what happened. Previous to this day, when I want to be angry, I'd push it. Or sad, I'd push it. I never really got there, but pretended to. But here, I didn't understand why I was so involved. And after the scene, I walked off stage for a while to compose myself. Came back on stage, and Lee said to me, I think you learned something. I said, yes, thank you, Lee. I think I did. And that little thing that he did with me was to teach me that if the actor believes in little things along the stage, if he believes it, if he believes the other actors, if he believes the circumstance, really believes the circumstance, he doesn't have to worry about emotion. It comes. That was the thing that I took from Lee, aside from he had a lot of other stuff, but he himself said that you don't have to all agree on what to take from what I say. After class, for example, Steve Hill and Eli Wallach and Annie Jackson and Julie Harris used to go to a cafe down below to discuss what we heard. And every one of us heard a different thing. Barbara Streisand told me that once Lee came to see her when she was doing Funny Girl. And he said, "You are wonderful." And she said, "Oh, Lee, I'm so sorry. I was so late today. I forgot to do my exercises." And he said, "Not doing the exercises is right for you, because what I saw tonight was great." So Lee knew that actors took different things from what he said, and it was okay with him. Let me tell you a story. One time Annie Jackson did a scene, and Lee said, "You're too emotional." And she said, "Lee, I did this scene 2 weeks ago, and you said I was not emotional enough. And now you tell me how to." He said, "I'll tell you a story, and then you'll understand what acting is." She said, "Okay." The story was 2 men come down the chimney. One comes out clean, and the other comes out dirty. Who washes? Oh, wait, I missed something. There was a priest and a rabbi talking. And the priest said to the rabbi, "Would you explain to me what the Talmud is?" Talmud is a book of laws. And the rabbi said, "No, it's too complicated. I can't." He said, "Look, I'm a man of the cloth. Why don't you try it?" "I can't. I won't, because I'll never make you understand." So the priest said, "Well, I have a friend, Rosenberg, who has a shoe store down the street. I'll ask him." He went there. Rosenberg was on the ladder taking inventory, and he said to him, "Would you tell me what the Talmud means?" And Rosenberg said, "No, but the only way I can tell you is I'll ask you 2 questions. 2 men come down the chimney. One comes out clean, the other dirty. Who washes?" So the priest says, "Obviously, the clean one looks at the dirty one." He said, "Well, the dirty one washes." "That's right, yeah." Well, Rosenberg says, "Not quite. Let me ask you another question. 2 men come down the chimney. One comes out clean, one comes out dirty. Who washes?" And the priest says, "Well, I told you before that I think the dirty one washes. And now, no, says the clean one looks at the dirty one and said, 'Oh, look at how dirty we got.' And he goes and he washes." "All right," says the priest. "Then here's the 3rd question. 2 men come down the chimney. One comes out clean, one comes out dirty. How's that possible?" And the priest says, "Look, you asked me a question, I answered you, and then you confused it. I'm all confused. Aha. Now you understand the Talmud." The same with acting, said.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. So speaking of the Talmud, etc. Well, anyway, I want to take you back to. You went back to when Israel was a state. You went back for a while, and you met somebody. Was that before Israel was a state? But you met your wife. And can you tell us
what did you say?
When you went back to Jerusalem and to
yes,
and you met your wife there. Can you talk about that? You didn't.
My wife.
Yeah, she was from there.
Okay.
Right? She grew up there.
I have to go back a little bit to explain the whole thing.
Sure.
My mother and father went back to Israel in 1948. I went to see them off on the ship. And while we were on the ship, my father said, "Oh, I forgot some very important papers on the table in the kitchen." I very quickly ran off the ship to the house. We were living not too far. And I got the papers and gave it to him. And I was out of breath. And I was so angry with him that I really burst out at him and let him have all my anger. And I could get angry in those days. More than now, anyway. My father and mother went to Israel, and I felt so terrible about doing that, that when I got a job in Peter Pan with Boris Karloff and Gene Arthur, I told the producer that I needed to take the summer off to go to Israel to speak to my father. And he gave me the vacation. And I went to Israel to talk to my father, and I, in a way, did make peace with him. I felt better. And I went to a wedding of somebody in the family, and there I met this young girl who had just been to Aden, Yemen, where she was a children's nurse in an operation called the Wings of Eagles, when the Israelis brought the Jews from Africa to Israel. So my wife was there to take care of the children. Anyway, she came back, and that's when I met her. And she was a small town girl. And I lived on 44th Street, right off Broadway, in a city that never sleeps. Well, kissing was, of course, out. Hugging only very, very privately. So I thought all theater people are the same. Here in Israel, the theater people are more free than others because they kiss on stage, they hug on stage. It comes to them more easily. So she was there. I did Tom in the Glass Menagerie, and I did Volk in Volpone. I did Moscow. And then when I thought that she was ready to meet other actors, I brought her to New York. And there at a party at the Actors Studio, Garen McGavin's wife came and sat on my lap. And she looked at my wife. She said, "Do you mind, dearie?" And my wife said, "Yes, I do." She got up. My wife kept that same naivete or simplicity till the day she died. Why am I telling you this? I forgot.
I brought it up about how you met your wife. Her name was Tia or Taya?
Tia. In Hebrew, Tchia, rebirth, and in English we call her Tia.
Tia.
Yeah. Yes.
And you credit her with saving you from going Hollywood at some point. Quote, going Hollywood.
She was my anchor. She was my anchor. She was very straight. No bullshit about it. Excuse me. No nonsense about her. She, whenever I did something that got very good reviews, she'd say, "Don't forget, you eat and you sleep and you defecate, you do everything that people do, you're no more, no less." And slowly I began to accept it. And when we went to Hollywood and I met the big stars, we'd be sometimes invited to the parties, and she would be reluctant to go often. One time she said, "Look, we have dinner with Harry and his wife, and I'm not breaking it." I said, "Fine." So we didn't go to see the stars. We had dinner with our friends. She kept my feet on the ground all through the time. And I thank God for that, because people who become stars and we go Hollywood, forget who they are, really have nothing to work for. Why? It's not them. The success is not theirs. The success is this character that they've become. I never lost touch with Israel. I never lost touch with my youth. I never lost touch with the poverty that we went through, terrible poverty. And I was very happy to have some measure of success. And she made it possible for me to enjoy the success and not the guy who went to Hollywood. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you also have talked about how, well, you mentioned earlier that Cary Grant sort of found Cary Grant and stayed that way, and you didn't for the reasons you expressed. But you worked with quite a few big movie stars, John Wayne and Cary Grant, it goes on and on. Do you have any tales to tell or principles about how you had to adjust to the big egos and the big power and what your role was?
Well, that's an interesting question, because an actor, as he comes up, has to make sure that his performance is right. But at the same time, he has to adjust to the fact that this little kid from Brooklyn is now sitting with Mary Astor, a big star, James Dunn, Victor Jory. One day I was working on a Playhouse night in LA, and Mary and James Dunn and Victor Jory asked me to join them for lunch, which was very flattering. And on the way back to CBS, Victor Jory saw a few autograph hunters coming to us. He says, let's hurry and let's get into the building before they come because they'll keep us here. And we all started hurrying when somebody said, Mr. Persoff, can I have your autograph, please? It's very strange because Mary Astor, James, and Victor Jory, all of these, they're big stars. And he was asking. So I asked him his name and I wrote to best wishes. Thank you very much, Nehemiah. Victor Jory said to me, you don't have to write a whole letter. All you have to do is sign. He was introducing me to success. And he was a little bit upset that it was me and not he. So there was an adjustment that I began to understand that I have to be very careful not to overshadow him. Mary Astor did another show with me. And for lunch, I asked her to come to my house. We lived just a few blocks away. And my wife prepared lunch. And Mary Astor came into the kitchen, worked with her, and started doing the hula. She had been down to Hawaii, and she learned how to do the hula dance. And Tia, my wife, looked at her. She didn't know what to make of it. It's never happened to her. And James Dunn, I think his name was. He invited me to dinner one night in Malibu, right across the way from the pier. And he began to unburden himself. And he told me of his unhappiness. And I just could not understand how a man so successful, he did Tree Grows in Brooklyn for the wonderful show, how a man like that could be so unhappy in his private life. I began to understand things, and that introduced me to Mary. Greer Garson, I worked with her. One day I was hosting some actress from Israel at a Hollywood restaurant, and I felt a hand come on my shoulder and a cheek next to mine. And, hi, Nikki, how are you? I look up, it's Greer Garson. Well, these people, it was something I hadn't forgotten because it was the first time that it's ever happened to me that a big star like that would come in. I was talking with Ann Sheridan one day outside her dressing room, and they called 5 minutes before we go on. She says, excuse me, I have to go in and get my tinsel. She was known as the it girl for her chest and the backside. And she went and she says, I have to get my tinsel. And she went inside and for a few minutes, and then she came back looking like Ann Sheridan. That was another thing that I learned, that what you see is not always there.
Okay, you told me once that one of your favorite directors and was a director who directed an episode of Gilligan's Island that you were on.
Yes.
And you told me that he was such a good director. Can you tell me why he was such a good director for you?
Yes, sure. I got this part, Gilligan's Island, in a comedy. I hadn't done much comedy before, but in the very beginning, I wanted to have my gun and I called my pistola. And he started laughing. And it's funny. And everything I did, he would laugh louder and louder and louder. And the more he laughed, the more I was creating really funny stuff. And when I hugged Tina Louise, my mustache started tweaking. And he just laughed. So the laughing was what I needed. When you go to a party and you tell a story and everybody laughs, you tell more. If you go there and you tell a story and nobody laughs, you forget it. That's what I call a good director, a director that makes you want to do more, want to do more. A director that tells you what to do all the time takes away the creativity from you. I don't like that, but I like a director like that who appreciates what I do.
Good. So I also want to ask you a little bit. You say in the book, I guess is where I read it, that you were disappointed not to get cast in the role of Tiev in Fiddler on the Roof. So you decided to do something about it. You stopped at a bookstore, and you want to take it from there?
Yes. I went to New York to do A Naked City. And there my agent called me. He said, Jerome Robbins wants to see you. They're taking a road company out of the Fiddler on the Roof. And he wants you to read. And I did. I read for him. I sang for him. And he said, very good. There's another scene I want you to work on. That's when he comes home drunk after he was drunk. I'd like to see you do that maybe Friday. I said, fine. And I sort of felt that he was interested, that I would get the role. So I worked on it, and finally Friday came and there was no call. I asked my agent about it, and he said, oh, they decided to go with Luther Adler. Luther Adler was the understudy. He wanted too much money at first, and they came together and they agreed, and now Luther is taking it on the road. I was terribly disappointed. On the way home at the airport, I went into a bookshop, and there was a book of short stories by Shalom Aleichem. He's the Jewish writer who wrote the story for Fiddler on the Roof. I read the book on the plane, and I thought to myself, this does not need dancing girls, it doesn't need songs, it doesn't need choreography. It just needs somebody to stand on the stage and speak the words that Shalom Aleichem wrote. It was so brilliant. It was then on the plane that I decided I would do a one-man show of the stories of Shalom Aleichem. I worked on it for about 9 months. Then I got a director and a theater and people to work in the theater, all my money, I put everything in it. And I remember driving to the theater on the freeway saying to myself, you jerk, whatever made you think that you can stand on the stage and tell these stories and people would come and pay money to see, what kind of an idiot are you? And I was so frightened, so frightened. I got on stage and the show went, it seemed to me like it was just 5 minutes, that's all. It began, and then it was an hour and a half show, hour and a half. After the show, the critics came to a party that I threw at a delicatessen, and they stayed until 3 o'clock in the morning. And that year I won a special award from the LA critics. The following year I went to San Francisco, and I did it. I got rave reviews, and I ran 3 months there. After that, I went home, and the producer of the show calls me one day, and he said, Nikki, I want you to come to San Francisco because they're handing out awards for the year. You're nominated. I said, no, I don't want to come. Why should I go there and sit while other people get the awards and He said, you don't have to worry about that. You and your show was the only one nominated. It was the Elephant Man, other big shows that were in competition with me. I won the best actor and best show of the year. I was the only one nominated. Then I was invited to go to Australia, and I did in Sydney and in Adelaide and the other big city, I forgot it. And so that was a great experience for me. And I thank Robbins for not hiring me, but I did do Fiddler on the Roof later in years. And I'll boast a little bit when I tell you that the critics in 3 papers said that they had seen 0 and 5 other actors do the show. And that my interpretation was the most satisfying. Not the singing, but my interpretation. The critic in Pittsburgh said that the lady who played my wife had done it with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And he says, I doubt that she ever had a tevya with the sensitivity that Persoff brought to the role. So
Congratulations.
that's how it happens.
Mighty fine. Okay. So I think we're going to wrap this up so we can have some time for questions and answers. So I have just a couple quick, maybe one. Yeah, after you moved to Central California, you had a health scare, so you quit acting, you went to Central California, and it sounds like you've been living an exceptionally fulfilling life there with art at the center, and that's because you're a painter. And by the way, let me plug it. If anybody wants to see his paintings, if you Google Nehemiah Persoff Gallery.
Thank you. And the name of the book is The Many Faces of Nehemiah, and could be purchased at, what's the place where it could be purchased? Amazon.
You can get it in a lot of places.
Thank you.
But
so your question was about when I got sick in San Diego?
No. That was just a point of reference. That the fact that you moved into painting is all I wanted to say, which we just talked about. And a couple things that I want to say is that two things. If any of you are interested in more of Nehemiah's work, on YouTube you can get something called Nehemiah Persoff's 101st birthday party or something like that, and it has a lot of clips of some of Nehemiah's work, and you can get it, within an hour or so. You can see a whole range of hugely genius work of this man. And the only other thing I want to plug is that you can get old Playhouse 90 things on YouTube, I believe it is. And Nehemiah and Maureen Stapleton were in a remake of For Whom the Bell Tolls with Jason Robards. It was two 90-minute segments, a huge production that John Frankenheimer directed. And you should do yourself a favor, and even though it's all grainy and so on, you see Nehemiah and Maureen Stapleton, you're seeing two actors who are not kidding around. It's just like really powerful work, live television. They know, they couldn't make any mistakes. Boy, was that something. And let's see. Yeah, so maybe we'll do this again next year when you're older and wiser, the 103, okay?
Let me tell you about For Whom the Bell Tolls, if I may.
Sure.
Tell you a story about that. The movie that was done with Gary Cooper had Akim Tamirov in the role Pablo, which I played on the Playhouse 90. When Playhouse 90 announced that they would be doing For Whom the Bell Tolls, Akim Tamirov wrote a letter to John Frankenheimer saying, listen, I was so good in the role. Whoever does it will just imitate me. So you might as well get the real thing and hire me. And Johnny hired me. Shortly after that, and by the way, I won the Best Supporting Actor Award for that, a Sylvania Award. Laurence Olivier won the Best Actor. So
So you're talking about the Playhouse 90, the
Oh yes. So after Playhouse 90, I got a job in the Naked City together with Akim Tamirov. And I thought, oh boy, he's going to get me in this, I'm sure, because he's so experienced. And so we got to work, and the first day he did nothing, no reference at all to Playhouse 90. And the second day, no, and the third day, no, until the last day we were standing on the street. Now, I have to tell you that in his role, there was one line that he delivered very well that became famous, and that was when he was provoked by one of the actors, he said, I don't provoke. And that became a well-known phrase that people recited. So we were standing on the street in Brooklyn, waiting for the lights to be fixed. And a guy comes off the sidewalk and circles us. We're both standing on the street. He circles around us. Finally, Tamirov says, well, what? He says, I don't provoke. And Tamirov says, You mean the movie or the television version? It was the only time he ever made reference to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that before we have questions and answers, which I'm really eager to get to, I just want to thank the people who put this together. The Eastchester Public Library, and Tracy Wright and Kate Klein and Teresa Chang all have done incredible work to make all this happen. And Paula Trushin, who just an amazing mind and spirit to put this together. If we can get some questions and answers, that would be great. I hope we can do this. I can help do this.
Mark, we're just about to unmute everyone. And if you have a question, you can either type it in the chat box or use the raised hand icon, and we'll try to get to you.
The chat seems to be disabled.
There's somebody. David Hilton would like to ask you a question.
Yes, thank you. Nehemiah, you mentioned that some of the actors that you'd worked with were basically very much liked by the camera, and so they became very successful. And I just wondered, were there any cinematographers that you worked with that you rated because of the fact that they made you look very good on the screen?
I'm terribly sorry. It was a bit garbled. Could you ask me that again, please?
Yes. Basically, you mentioned that there were certain actors that the camera loved, and so they had successful careers. And I just wondered if there were any cinematographers who you worked with who made you look very good on the screen, and that in some ways helps your career.
Did you get that, Nehemiah?
No, I'm terribly sorry.
Okay, he was asking if there were any particular cinema photographers that you liked that made you look good on camera. I'm sorry if I'm not.
Well, I think they all did. They all did. I always looked much better than I thought I did. They all were good. Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Did that answer? Did I answer you?
Did you? I don't see him up here anymore.
Did I answer you?
Yes, you did. Can you think of any of the cameramen's names in particular that you rated?
I'm sorry, I don't know. I had so much trouble keeping my lines in my head that I never had the time to learn anybody. Sorry.
I see. Yes, I can understand that. So, thank you very much, Nehemiah.
Could I just ask everyone to mute who's not asking a question, please? We're getting a lot of background noise. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Persoff, you say you had trouble remembering your lines, but I'm amazed at your memory of every detail of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always remember my own name in the morning, and you seem to remember every detail. I'm amazed. And thank you for a lifetime of beautiful work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, there's an echo there that makes it difficult for me to hear.
yes, I hear it too. Is this still going on? Maybe that's better.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Anybody else want to ask Nehemiah a question? There's somebody waving their hand. Yes, Sharon Shane.
Yeah, I was wondering if when you were in the early days of the Actors Studio, if there were the sensory exercise classes, and if you had a chance to partake of them, what you thought about the sensory work for an
Yes.
actor.
Are you a member of the studio?
Yes, I am. Lifetime member.
Before I answer you, I want to say something about the studio.
Okay.
The studio, my time in the studio has been some of the happiest time in my life. And I love you. I love all the students who are there now. And I know what you're going through. I know the problems you're having. I know how hard it is to survive in this tough business. And I want to congratulate you for hanging on and keep hanging on until you make it.
Oh, thank
Now,
you. It's very meaningful.
Welcome. Now
Hi.
the question was,
I have a question.
The question was about the sensory work. If
yes,
you,
the sensory work. When we first started, the first exercise that Kazan gave us was to Donnie Hanmer, one of the actors, and he explained what it was, sense memory, to drink a cup without coffee in it, with hot, cold, all of that. It's the memory of that sense. And he said, would you peel a banana for me? And Donnie said, okay. And we were all new to the studio. We wanted to be really good, really concentrated. And so Donnie started peeling quite good. Then he got the other part. Cloris Leachman then walked in. We found out later that she always came in late, eating her breakfast. She walked in and took a seat behind him. And suddenly he said to Kazan, you know, I can smell the banana. I swear. And all of us watching, yes, I smell it too. I smell it too. Wow, I smell the banana. And Cloris said, I do too. We looked at her, she was eating a banana. Stella Adler, by the way, is a big one. Was a big one for that, for the sense memory exercises. Yeah.
Okay, here's somebody waving their hands. Rita.
Hi,
Shapiro.
yes. Thank you, sir. It was a lovely interview. I really enjoyed myself. What I wanted to ask you is, what do you think was the difference of when a camera loved you and when a camera didn't love you? What was it? What was that characteristic or that focus that made the difference whether a camera loved you or not? And
Sorry, say that again.
I understand.
We're having a roll-up with spinach?
I understand the question. Yeah. The difference that you notice is that if the camera does not like you, no matter what you do, it's nothing. If the camera likes you, no matter what you do, it's something. It's something to look at. If your facial structure is such that the camera likes, I was once, I had a Martin Ritt substitute one day for the t-shirt. And Marty said to me, Nikki, you don't always have to be interesting. You don't always have to be working. You can relax. You'd be just as interesting, relaxed, as if you try to be interesting. I thought about that. When I did my one-man show, I used to take time, so much time between stories and between telling the story, that previous to that, I would have thought, no, I can't do that. But I found that I could stand there for minutes and the audience was with me. So if the camera likes you, you can take your time, you can do whatever you want to. If it doesn't like you, no matter what you do, it's bad. That's it.
do you happen to have an example of who
Well,
the camera did not love?
Alfred Lunt, Lynn Fontaine, Catherine Cornell, Helen Hayes, that whole group of actors who were so big on the stage, when they tried their hand in a movie like Alfred Lunt, Lynn Fontaine and The Guardsman, didn't work out. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. You're very welcome.
Here's a question from David Hilton. I think it's from David Hilton, who said, now that you are painting, I wonder if you have any artists that you can name who have inspired you and say in what way they have done so. And with your artwork, do you have, I'm losing the text here. I don't know. Anyway, is there an artist or artists who've influenced you? While I look for the rest of this.
I didn't get the end of that. Do I have a favorite artist?
Who have influenced you?
Part of the question, and then?
Oh, yeah. That was the first question. The second question is, do you have a gallery or agent who represents you?
What do they have on?
So first, two very different questions.
Gallery or agent.
I see. Okay. What was the first part of the question?
Other painters who've influenced you.
Oh, yeah, the favorite. I think that I could say safely that one of my favorite actors is Paul Cézanne. I love his work. As for a gallery, I used to display at a gallery, and when they sold one of my paintings, they shortchanged me. And I realized then that not all, but most of the dealers will do that. So I took my paintings out, and I'm online. I sell them. I don't have an agent, I just sell online. Okay? Right?
Okay. We still have some kind of extraneous noise, so if everybody would mute if they're not talking, it would be really helpful, I think.
When do you want to have a drink?
Okay, is there anyone else? Oh, here comes some more. Somebody's asking what it was like to work for Michael Landon when you appeared on Little House on the Prairie.
Hey.
Michael Landon. Michael Landon was Jewish. And whenever I came on,
there today,
me with a Jewish song.
So thank you for your call, and thank you for being at Descanso. They always call me and say, please stop Liam from watering all those things.
Excuse me, somebody's not muted and they're on a telephone call. Could you please not do that? Okay, sorry.
Undo Nehemiah.
Yes.
So Michael Landon was Jewish, and every time you came on set, what ensued?
What is the question?
Well, it was asked, but it was a lot of noise around it. So I'll ask it again. What was it like to work for Michael Landon on Little House on the Prairie? And you said, well, he was Jewish, and you laughed, and then it got...
Yeah. We had a very good relationship, and he was, as I said before, I don't like directors who push me around or tell me what to do, except Kazan. Kazan had a way of going inside you and knowing, but other directors, I preferred much that they leave me alone and trust me. And when they did, then I performed and it was okay. But I didn't like directors who told me from moment to moment what to do, because then I'd be imitating them and not really giving them myself.
Good.
In other words, I like directors who respected me.
That's not an unusual want, yeah. So here's Kevin Brown, who's wanting to ask you a question directly. Kevin, can you unmute?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I've been a big fan ever since seeing your work in The Untouchables when I was a kid as Greasy Thumb Jake Guzik. And speaking of directors, you mentioned earlier you're working with John Wayne, and there's that film, The Comancheros, which pops up all the time now. And I realize you're basically playing a James Bond villain in that film, which really parallels the plot of Dr. No, which came out that same year. But do you have anything you can tell us about working with also the director, Michael Curtiz, one of the great directors?
Yes, let me tell you about that. I came to Tucson, Arizona a few days before I was to shoot the film. So I had time to watch the film that they've shot, and I knew that Stu Whitman was a fine actor, Ina Balin was a fine actress, but they acted in a different way than John Wayne acted. John Wayne just let it go smooth, and he didn't get too upset too much. But what he said was law, and I realized that the thing that I had prepared to do was wrong because I became emotional and so. I decided that I would do the role just the way John Wayne does it, because the star sets the tone for the picture. If you're on an equal level with the star, you're doing all right. If you're trying to do something else, he wipes you out. So I took that into account when I did the role, and I think it worked out all right. What was
it's an underrated film.
Pardon?
I think it's an underrated film.
What?
Underrated. It doesn't get the acknowledgement it deserves.
Oh, what's underrated?
The Comancheros, that movie you.
Oh, yeah.
And anything in particular about Michael Curtiz you can tell us?
Yes, let me tell you about Michael Curtiz. John Wayne did a scene with me in which he was sitting lower than I was. I was on a high chair. And he became quite emotional in the very first take. And Curtiz said, cut, let's have another one. And he did a second take in which, in my opinion, not so good. And he said, print. So I said to John, I think that the first take you did was better. So John said to me, Duke, they call him, we'll print them both and see. Curtiz was nearby and he said to me, are you directing this film or am I? He didn't like it. He didn't, and he was right. And he was right in choosing the second take, because the first take I liked because I liked an actor who expresses emotion. But the emotion that John showed in that first take was not in sync with the rest of the performance. The second take was. So Curtiz was right and I was wrong. Now, we're standing at another time, we're standing in the hot sun and filming, and I said to John, who was next to me, I call him John, but he asked, was Mr. Wayne to me. I said, it's terribly hot here, isn't it? And he said, yeah, and he walked away, came back with a few guys, and they put a big screen over the entire football field, and everybody worked in a much cooler atmosphere. And Curtiz said to John, that was a great idea you had. And he said, don't thank me, thank Mickey. And Curtiz looked at me and he said nothing. He still held the grudge because I interfered when I told John that take number one was better than two. That was Curtiz's last film, unfortunately.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask you also briefly about doing Willie Loman in Stratford?
Yes, I did that.
Salesman.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, the director in that and I did not see eye to eye. He said, this man is going to commit suicide in an hour and a half. I want to see that. And I said, what you're seeing here is not an hour and a half. What you're seeing is back 30 years scenes with his kids that you're seeing, all of that. He is not crazy at that time. He's only going to commit suicide at the end of this scene, this play. And he did not accept it at all. And so he pushed me into a performance that I didn't want to do. But I should have really quit. But John Hirsch, the director of the Shakespeare Festival at that time, was a great fan of mine because he directed me in the Dybbuk, for which I won the Best Actor Award. And Hirsch gave me some 25 different roles on CBS and in Quebec and in Vancouver. So John Hirsch got me that, and I didn't want to quit, so I should have quit. But then I did Salesman again, and I was more happy with that performance than I did with that other director. Okay.
So here's a question from LF. It was a text question. Do you have any particular character you enjoyed playing the most? I can guess what that would be, but please.
You know, in Finnegan's Rainbow, the guy sings, "If I'm not near the girl I love the girl I'm near." So it was with me. Every show I did, I gave everything I had to it. I never stopped to think, am I enjoying this or not? I just did my best. Sometime when the show was well received, like say, Some Like It Hot, Yentl, things like that, Twins, then it becomes a favorite because the audience likes it. I get fan mail from people who've seen these. And so that's the way it is. I didn't have any favorite when I did them. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Now you heard me sing. Now you know why they said. You know why they said Persoff was not as good as the others singing, but he was better in it acting.
Mark, there's somebody named Patricia who has a question.
Okay, Patricia.
Hi, I've enjoyed a lot of your work, and one of your roles that I thought was really super was in a Columbo episode, and I wonder how you remember that and working with Peter Falk and Jack Cassidy.
Jack Cassidy was unfortunate in that he had a nose that looked like John Barrymore. And that haunted him constantly. And instead of playing himself, he played John Barrymore in everything he did. And I thought that was very sad. As for the show itself, I was unhappy that I was killed so early in the script.
You were great. You were absolutely great. You were so nasty.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
are you an actress?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I have another question, Nehemiah. When you did The Untouchables, you mostly played gangsters, Jewish or Italian gangsters. But an episode I saw, it just fascinated me. You played a kind of watchmaker, but you're really an arsonist, and you're going to do your last gig. And everything about you was different than any other role I saw you. You had a different rhythm and different stance. You walked differently. Even the glint in your eye was different. And can you talk about working on that role? And you couldn't have had much time to create that role.
Yes. What was the end of that?
There wasn't much time, was there, to create such a vastly different character for yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what I liked about The Untouchables was that what's his name? The guy that played the lead,
Robert Stack.
Robert Stack. He had a way of not looking me in the eye. He would look down to the floor when he talked, and I took that as a personal insult. Why, I don't know, but I did. And so I had a relationship with him that was quite real. Because in my mind, the son of a bitch was not looking me. What is he hiding from me? And he thinks that I'm a gangster, and therefore he doesn't want to talk to me. And it developed into a personal thing in which all I had to do was get on with John and with the actor, and I'd get riled up. I went to his house for dinner many times and had fun with him. I loved him and his wife. But on the set, let me tell you something about the Untouchables. One day, I came on. I was wearing a gangster suit and I had a gun on my shoulder. And they were shooting a scene. And as they started, a man across the street started a lawnmower. Had a cut. They didn't know what to do. So I took it upon myself. I was the gangster mood. I walked across the street and I said to the guy, wouldn't you rather take this thing over to the other corner and do it there? Because it's going to be a lot of trouble if you do it there, okay? I said, oh yeah, sure. And he went away. We shot the scene, we shot my scene, everything was fine. So the gangster paid off. I don't hear anybody laughing. Thank you.
So, okay, let's see. Okay, so this is an interesting maybe question. Thank you very much for sharing your life experiences with us. Sorry if you are tired of this question, but a young generation on internet is still trying to resolve the meaning behind the hearing aid of Little Bonaparte in Some Like It Hot. There are many secret meanings and references in this movie, but no one can guess the reference or idea behind the hearing aid.
I didn't quite understand the question. The idea behind the what?
The hearing aid that you wore as Little Bonaparte.
Yes.
Is there a meaning for that? Was there a, they're trying to figure out if there was some.
That was Billy Wilder. The director gave me that to put on, and he asked me to shave my head bald too. Let me tell you about that, the way I got the role. Charles Lederer was a guy who was brought up at the Hearst Castle. He knew everybody in Hollywood. And let me get my thoughts together again. Charles Lederer.
So Some Like It Hot, Billy Wilder and
Lederer. Oh, yeah. Charles Lederer told me that one night he was playing cards with Billy Wilder. And Billy Wilder said, that son of a bitch, Eddie Robinson, he walked out on me the last minute. He's supposed to shoot, supposed to do the part, and he walked out just, and I don't know, I need somebody to do the part. I don't know who the hell they get. So Charles said, why don't you get Nehemiah Persoff? Who? Nehemiah Persoff. I don't know who he is. Well, he's good, he'll do it. He said, okay. No. Get on the phone and call your agent. You got the same agent as he has, MCA. So finally, Billy agreed and he got on the phone. He said, do you know an actor by the name of, what's his name? Nehemiah Persoff, said Charles Lederer. He said, so the agent jumped, you mean Nicky? Yeah, sure, he'd be great. And then Charles Lederer went and talked with Tony Curtis, who was my student in the same school as I. And he said, sure, he'd be great. And so did Jack Lemmon. And so he hired me, he called me in, we talked for a minute, and he hired me. When we went to shoot in rehearsal, Sammy Davis Jr., Sidney Poitier, and Dorothy Dandridge were shooting a movie, I forgot the name, a very famous movie, Next Door. They shut down because Sammy was a great fan and he wanted to see me shooting this. So they got in, and the minute they walked in, Billy Wilder started telling jokes, and I was ready to work. And Billy was telling jokes, till the place was jumping with laughter, and I was supposed to do this serious part. The result was that my seriousness with the joke in the air caused the character to be dangerous and funny at the same. It was Billy's design, I guess. Very smart director. It was his design that he would piss me off by telling these jokes, and he did. And what you say is on the screen, and fortunately, it's very well liked, and I like it too. But it wasn't me; it was part me, part Billy.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking we should wrap this up. I don't see any more questions, and this has been just a wonderful, wonderful special time. And
thank you very much. What a pleasure it was.
Yeah. Okay. Get back to painting.
Be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the program.
Is there any more that we need to say, summing up? That are we good? The people who are my puppeteers?
I think we're okay.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next year, Nehemiah.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you. It was
Thank you
wonderful.
so much
Thank
for
you.
your time. Thank you.
It was
Thank
such a
you.
joy speaking with you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I'd love to hear more. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you do it again.
Okay.
Okay. Goodness.
Thank
You're
you.
quite a guy.
Indeed, indeed.
You need to go.